All right, so DeepSeek V4 Pro just posted an 80.6% on Subway Bench verified, and Codex is sitting at roughly 74%. That gap changes the math on which model you actually want writing your production code right now. Both models dropped major updates in 2026, and the pricing gap between them is now wide enough to break a team's cost model overnight. I'm comparing DeepSeek V4 Pro versus Codex across 4 real tests, pulling from 18 verified sources, 0 vendor spin. And honestly, the part that got me wasn't the benchmark scores at all. It's how Codex handles your context window on large code bases. And that one detail could quietly wreck your workflow before you even notice it. So this comparison is for developers and teams who are literally deciding right now which model to wire into their coding agent or agentic workflow. Big wrong, and you're either overpaying by 11 times per input token, or you're working with a model that can't hold your whole code base in context. And both of those are real concrete costs, not hypotheticals. Test 1 is code generation accuracy, and the failure mode you want to avoid is this. You send the model a real GitHub issue, it comes back with code that looks right, you ship it, and it breaks in prod because the model was guessing on edge cases it couldn't actually solve. That debugging time is expensive, and benchmark scores are the closest proxy we have for catching that before it happens. What I found here is pretty interesting. DeepSeek V4 Pro Max hits 80.6% on SWE bench verified and 93.5% on live code bench pass at 1, while Codex lands at roughly 74% on SWE bench, and there's no published live code bench figure for it at all. Bear in mind these came from different evaluation setups, so treat the gap as directional, not a controlled head-to-head. DeepSeek V4 Pro takes this 1, and honestly I was expecting the gap to be tighter, a 6+ point spread on SWE bench, with Codex having no published competitive programming score at all, is a pretty clear directional win. So that puts us at DeepSeek V4 Pro 1, Codex 0. Test 2 is API pricing per token. And the failure mode here is your AWS bill at the end of the month. You build a coding agent, it runs fine in testing, you scale it up, and suddenly you're burning through output tokens at a rate you never modeled. And if you pick the wrong model, that cost difference is the kind of number that kills a project budget. I pulled the actual list prices from OpenRouter and OpenAI's rate card. DeepSeek V4 Pro runs at $0.435 per million input tokens and 87 cents per million output tokens, while Codex, via the GPT 5 API, is $5 per million input and $30 per million output, which works out to roughly 11 times cheaper on input and about 34 times cheaper on output. And those are not rounding errors. Now, the honest caveat is that Codex also has subscription options through ChatGPT Plus and Pro, starting at $20 a month, and those plans don't bill per token the same way. So if you're a solo dev doing light use, a flat monthly rate might actually work out cheaper. The per token comparison only really bites you when you're running heavy agentic workloads at scale. DeepSeek V4 Pro wins pricing, and what got me is just how lopsided the output cost is. I was expecting maybe a 3x or 4x difference, but 34 times cheaper per output token is kind of wild when coding workloads are output heavy by nature. So that puts us at DeepSeek V4 Pro 2, Codex 0. Test 3 is context window and long file handling, and the failure mode is subtle but really painful. You're working on a large code base, you load up a bunch of files, and the model silently drops the earlier context because it ran out of room, and it doesn't tell you, it just starts hallucinating things that contradict the code it already saw. And you spend an hour debugging something that was never broken. What surprised me here is the gap between advertised and actual. Both models advertise roughly 1 million token context windows, but Codex's live session caps usable input at about 258,000 tokens, which is a 75% reduction from what it says on the box, while DeepSeek V4 Pro holds close to its full 1 million and scores 83.5 on the MRCR 1 million retrieval benchmark, confirming it's actually using that context accurately. To be fair, there's a known client-side parsing bug where some tools like Client display DeepSeek's context as 128,000, even when it's configured for 1 million. And that's a client bug, not a model limit. Community reports also flag some caveats on DeepSeek's full 1 million in practice, so the gap is real, but it's worth testing in your own setup before you rely on it completely. DeepSeek V4 Pro takes this one too. And honestly, the Codex 258,000 live cap was the thing I didn't see coming. Both products advertised 1 million tokens, so I was expecting a pretty even result. But Codex's architectural constraint cuts its usable input to about a quarter of that in a real session. So DeepSeek V4 Pro 3, Codex 0. Test 4 is IDE integration and toolchain fit, and the failure mode here is wasted setup time. You spend half a day trying to get a model wired into your editor through some community extension. It breaks on multi-turn requests with a 400 error. And now you're debugging the tool instead of the code, and that friction compounds every single day you're working in that environment. So I looked at what's actually available for each model. Codex ships an official IDE extension from OpenAI, plus a CLI you can install via NPM or Homebrew, while DeepSeek V4 Pro gets you RU code, client, and continue, all community maintained via an OpenAI compatible API. And there's a known multi-turn 400 error on DeepSeek's side that needs a workaround. Plus, one CTO publicly said Codex wasn't useful for real project work beyond basic tasks. So take that community data for what it is. Honestly, the gap here is a lot smaller than you'd think. RU code and client are genuinely well regarded in the developer community, and a lot of people already use them as their primary VS Code setup. So Codex having an official extension matters more if you're starting from scratch or if your team has a strict policy about community maintained tools. For most devs already in the client ecosystem, this is kind of a non-issue. This one's a tie, and I'll be honest, I was expecting Codex to pull a clear win here since it has official tooling from OpenAI. But the community extensions for DeepSeek are strong enough that it's really hard to call this a meaningful capability gap, so the scoreboard stays at DeepSeek V4 Pro 3, Codex 0, with 1 tied. DeepSeek V4 Pro wins on benchmark scores, 93.5 live code bench and 80.6 SWE bench verified. It wins on token pricing at 11 times cheaper on input and 34 times cheaper on output. Wins on effective context at roughly 1 million usable tokens versus Codex's 258,000 live cap, and it's available right now on multiple API providers with no waitlist. Codex wins on official IDE support. Since OpenAI ships a first-party extension while DeepSeek depends on community tools, it wins on zero migration friction. If you're already on the OpenAI API, it wins on subscription pricing if a flat monthly bill is easier for your team than metering every token. And it has an explicit documented language support list covering Python, JS, TypeScript, Java, Go, Rust, and more. Okay, so going in, I thought this would be closer, but DeepSeek V4 Pro won 3 of 4 dimensions, and it wasn't really close on any of them. So here's the decision rule. If you're building a cost-sensitive agentic coding workflow or working with large code bases, go DeepSeek V4 Pro. But if you're already deep in the OpenAI ecosystem and want a flat monthly bill with official tooling, Codex is the path of least resistance. Just know you're paying dramatically more per token.